Have you ever wondered why a man suddenly becomes haunted by the memory of the woman he once ignored or took for granted? Why, only when she is gone, her silence complete, does she become the echo he cannot escape? This is not mere romance or regret. It is the unconscious confronting him with the shadow he avoided. In Jungian thought, what a man truly longs for is not always the woman herself, but the reflection of his own depths he once saw in her. When she withdraws, that mirror disappears, leaving him with a wound his pride cannot heal. Men are not haunted by the women who stay endlessly available. They are haunted by the one who steps beyond reach. For the woman, this moment is her hidden power. Silence is not weakness. Detachment is not cruelty. Her very absence becomes presence. Her refusal to engage becomes the lesson his ego cannot resist. He craves her not for who she is, but for the forgotten parts of himself she once awakened. And here lies the danger. Too often, women mistake this craving as proof of their worth. But her worth was never in his recognition. It has always lived within her own becoming. When she pulls away, she is not punishing him. She is reclaiming herself. Men crave what they cannot control. Distance strips away the illusion of possession. Only then do they see what they once held without seeing. In Jung's language, individuation demands separation, the courage to walk one's own path, even if it means leaving behind those who only learned your value when you were gone. He craves her because she has become mystery, and mystery cannot be caged, only honored. What haunts him is not just her absence, but the truth that she was never his to hold. When a woman finally withdraws her energy, when her silence replaces the noise of her devotion, something extraordinary happens inside the man who once believed her presence was endless. His mind begins to replay the smallest details, the way she looked at him without words, the warmth of her laughter, the way her absence now feels louder than her presence ever did. This is not just nostalgia. This is the unconscious demanding that he face the wound of neglect and the arrogance of entitlement. The sovereign feminine teaches not through lectures, but through distance. In her detachment, she confronts him with what he refused to see, that her love was never an infinite resource, that her patience had an end, and that her light was a gift, not a guarantee. The man may tell himself that he wants her back, but in truth, he wants to escape the emptiness he now feels. He mistakes regret for devotion, craving for love, obsession for intimacy. This is why you must be careful as a woman when he comes crawling back, when his words turn poetic in the shadow of your silence. He does not long for your essence. He longs for the reflection of himself he once glimpsed in your eyes. If you return too soon, you will discover the cycle has not changed. The lesson remains unlearned. His craving will fade once his ego feels soothed, and you will find yourself erased again. Jung reminds us that true love requires individuation, the merging of two whole beings, not the feeding of one through the sacrifice of the other. When you detach, you begin that process for yourself. You stop existing as his mirror and start walking your own path. And in doing so, you become untouchable in the most powerful way, not because you are beyond love, but because you no longer settle for half of it. For the man, her absence becomes archetypal. She is no longer flesh and blood. She becomes memory, symbol, even myth. He may dress his regret in stories. She was the one who got away. She was too much. Or the timing was wrong. But beneath these stories lies the simple truth. He did not see her when she stood before him. Only now, in the silence of loss, does he awaken. And yet, the deeper question is not what he feels, but what she becomes. Will she tether herself to his regret, or will she walk forward unchained? For the woman who learns to hold her silence, who does not rush back into the arms of apology, becomes something rare. She embodies her own worth without needing his confirmation. She carries mystery, and mystery is the feminine's greatest power. Men crave the woman they can no longer reach because she reveals to them the truth their ego resists. Some things cannot be owned, only honored. Some women cannot be caged, only remembered. And in that haunting, he is left with the taste of what he misused, and the reality that she has already crossed into a realm where craving cannot pull her back. When a man is confronted with the loss of a woman he once believed would never leave, the structure of his ego begins to collapse. What seemed secure, her presence, her affection, her endless giving, is suddenly gone, and with that absence, the illusion of his control shatters. Jung would call this the breaking of the persona, the mask a man wears to protect his fragile self. The mask tells him he is strong, that he is wanted, that he is in command, but the silence of the woman reveals the truth. His power was dependent on her presence, not on his own grounded being. And here lies the paradox. The more unavailable she becomes, the more his unconscious projects desire onto her. It is not only about her beauty, her kindness, or the intimacy they once shared. It is a bow, but the archetype she now embodies. In her distance she transforms into the anima, the living image of the feminine within his psyche. The anima is not gentle, she is ruthless in her lessons. She awakens him by leaving him with his emptiness. She forces him to see the hunger inside that no conquest, no distraction, no substitute can satisfy. This is why men often chase harder after the woman who has slipped away than they ever did when she stood before them. They are not simply chasing her, they are chasing the lost parts of themselves. But here is where the danger unfolds. He does not always want to grow. He does not always want to integrate his shadow or face his wounds. Sometimes he simply wants her presence back to soothe his ache. And if she returns too quickly, she may find herself reduced once again to a balm for his unhealed fractures. For the woman, silence is sacred. It is the space where she stops feeding his ego and begins nourishing her own soul. In that silence, she realizes her worth was never proven by his craving, nor diminished by his neglect. She is not valuable because he now sees her absence. She has always been valuable, even when he was blind. Her silence is the doorway to individuation, the process of becoming whole within herself. Ask yourself, how many times have you mistaken his sudden attention for transformation? How many times have you let the sound of his regret convince you that he finally understands? Regret is not always awakening. Craving is not always commitment. Sometimes it is only the echo of his loss, not the promise of his growth. The sovereign feminine must discern the difference. Men crave the woman they cannot reach because it confronts them with mystery, and mystery terrifies the ego. The masculine wants to conquer, to define, to possess, but the feminine, in her sovereignty, resists definition. She is not an object, not a prize, not a possession. She is a force, a current, a mystery to be met with reverence. The moment she steps back, the man is left with the unbearable truth that his desire cannot control her essence. And so he is haunted. He replays her words, her gestures, her laughter, searching for the moment he lost her. He tells himself stories to protect his pride, but the shadow remains. He cannot change the fact that what he dismissed has now become the one thing he cannot have. This is the cruel but necessary medicine of the psyche, teaching through loss what it refused to honor in presence. For the woman, this is not cruelty but freedom. She is not defined by his craving, nor diminished by his regret. She walks forward into herself, her silence not empty, but alive with power. She becomes untouchable, not because she has hardened, but because she has awakened. And the man who craves her now does not crave a woman he can control. He craves a woman who has become mystery itself. The longer a man sits with the absence of the woman he once overlooked, the more the silence grows into something unbearable. At first, he may tell himself it is temporary, that she will return, that her distance is only a test. But as days stretch into weeks, the truth pierces him. She is not waiting. She is not orbiting his world anymore. She has stepped into her own gravity, and he no longer has access to her light. This realization cuts deeply because it touches his shadow, the part of himself that thrives on validation, control, and the illusion of dominance. When she was near, he could take her for granted, because the ego always assumes abundance. But the unconscious teaches through scarcity. What he thought was permanent now feels like a dream slipping through his hands, and the more he cannot reach her, the more her image grows larger inside his mind. He begins to obsess, not out of love, but out of loss. Here is the bitter truth. Men often mistake longing for transformation. They think their craving proves devotion, But craving is often nothing more than the ego's hunger. It is the panic of losing something that once validated him. If she returns too soon, he may calm his hunger, but he will not have changed. The cycle repeats, and the woman once again becomes a mirror for his comfort rather than a force for his growth. For the woman, understanding this distinction is everything. Silence is her teacher too. It shows her that she is not responsible for fixing his wounds or soothing his shadow. She learns that she does not exist to be the medicine for a man unwilling to heal himself. Jung spoke of individuation, the journey of becoming whole. A woman in her sovereignty realizes she cannot individuate if she keeps surrendering her power to the cravings of an unawakened man. This is why her detachment must be more than a tactic. It must be truth. She must choose herself not because it makes him crave her, but because her soul demands it. Her silence is not a performance, it is a reclamation. It is the moment she stops trying to be understood by him and instead understands herself. Men crave the woman they cannot reach because it is the first time they face the limits of their control. And in those limits lies the feminine mystery. The feminine cannot be possessed, she can only be met. The man who has not learned reverence will experience her only as loss, never as union. He will chase the ghost of her memory, but he will not hold her essence. Ask yourself, how many times has a man only learned your worth after you pulled away? How many times have you felt the weight of his obsession only after you gave him your silence? His craving may stir your compassion, but it must not be confused with his evolution. Compassion does not require return. You can witness his ache without sacrificing your freedom. For the woman who stays true to her silence, something powerful awakens. She discovers that she does not need to be chased to feel valuable. Her value is not measured in how much a man regrets losing her. It is measured in how deeply she knows her own worth when no one is watching. She becomes sovereign, not as an act of revenge, but as an act of becoming. And so the man is left craving, not seeing. Imply the woman, but the mystery she carried, the mirror she once provided, the part of himself he glimpsed and lost. But the woman, she is no longer waiting to be reached. She has crossed the threshold where craving cannot touch her, where absence is no longer loss, but liberation. When a man reaches the point where his craving turns into torment, he begins to realize that he is no longer chasing a woman, he is chasing a ghost. The living, breathing woman he once knew has transformed. She has shed the version of herself who waited, who forgave endlessly, who watered a desert hoping it would bloom. What remains now is a sovereign force, untouchable, uninterested in returning to the shadows she once endured. This is why his obsession grows sharper with time. He does not crave her as she is now, but the version of her he once had access to. Yet that woman no longer exists. She has evolved, and evolution cannot be reversed. His craving becomes circular, a loop that feeds itself on memory and regret. He convinces himself that if she returned he would do better, but Jung would remind us, longing alone does not integrate the shadow. Without the courage to face his wounds, the cycle repeats. For the woman, this stage is the test. His messages, his apologies, his sudden urgency, all of these may strike the heart. They may tempt her to believe he has awakened. But she must look deeper. Is he drawn to her essence, or merely to the echo of his own emptiness? Is he willing to confront his shadow, or does he simply want her to soothe it again? In her silence, she holds the line. She begins to understand that craving is not love, that obsession is not devotion, that regret is not transformation. These are signals of the psyche in turmoil, not guarantees of change. And in this understanding, she grows untouchable. Her boundaries are no longer a wall of fear, but a temple of reverence. To enter, one must come whole, not broken, and demanding her light to heal the darkness. The man now feels what Marcus Aurelius once wrote. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Yet most men resist this truth. They believe their strength lies in reclaiming her, not in reclaiming themselves, and so they chase, not realizing that every step taken in desperation only confirms their weakness. The feminine mystery, once lost, becomes eternal. The man will carry her absence into new relationships, into future years, into moments of stillness when no one else is watching. She becomes the unhealed lesson he avoids, the shadow that whispers in silence, not because she belongs to him, but because he never truly met her when she stood before him. And what of her? She is no longer chained to his memory. She does not feed on his craving, nor does she allow his regret to define her. She walks forward, lighter, freer, whole. The silence that once felt heavy now becomes her companion. She no longer needs to explain, to prove, to argue. Her absence has already spoken for her. This is the culmination of individuation, to detach from external validation, to no longer measure your worth by the hunger in another's eyes. The woman who steps into this space becomes radiant, not because she is unreachable, but because she is finally aligned with herself. The man craves her because she is mystery, but mystery cannot be owned, it can only be honored, and once she learns this, she will never again settle for being a man's lesson. She will only settle for being met as an equal, in reverence, in wholeness, in truth. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.